This is episode 94 of the Beyond the Food Show, and today we're talking to Anna Margolis, a holistic midwife, about the pregnancy and birthing process and the impact it can still have on our life today. My name is Stephanie Dodier. I'm a clinical nutritionist at 35. I was strapped with severe anxiety, panic attack, obesity, and my health completely collapsed. I needed solution and my journey began. Each episode of the Beyond the Food Show, we bring you an expert or a message to help you achieve your health goal, unlock your self-confidence, and live a better life. Let's dive in. This episode of the Beyond the Food Show is brought to you by Beautycounter. Now, Beautycounter creates safer and effective skincare and cosmetics for women and the entire family, and this is why I decided to partner with them. Beautycounter banned 1,500 harmful chemicals from their product, including fragrances, hormone disruptor, phthalate, paraben, and oxybenzone from their sun care product. Now, Europe country have banned more than 1,600 harmful chemical, Canada 600, and the US a mere 30. We need to take responsibility not only for what goes in our mouth, but also what we put on our skin. If you want to know more, you can register for my safe skincare community at stephaniedodier.com/safe skincare, or you can visit the website at stephaniebeautycounter.com. Now, today's episode is with Anna Margolis, a licensed certified midwife, OBGYN nurse practitioner. She's a third-generation guide to mama-to-be in the birthing process, and her approach is very integrative and also takes into account the emotional component of not only birthing, but also the whole pregnancy. And if you know my philosophy with regards to our relationship to food, you know that emotion has a huge part to play in that. And in a previous episode 84 with Irene Lyon, she explained to us, she's a somatic expert, and she explained to us how trauma and emotion overall can actually be trapped in our body, and that includes birthing. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to dive into the whole subject of pregnancy and birthing because, let's face it, 99% of the people listening to this podcast are women who have experienced or will be experiencing birthing and pregnancy, and the roller coaster of emotion and expectations surrounding it, and how we can actually navigate through that with a much better approach that will lead us to have less trauma. Or if we've already given birth, how can we go about reversing any potential negative experience around birthing? So it's a very cool episode. I can't wait to share that with you. So if you're ready, let's do this. Welcome to the show, Anna Margolis. How are you?
I'm fine. Wonderful. So nice to be here with you.
I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today because the whole birthing process as a woman, the experience from beginning to end, is not something that we have touched upon. And once I met you, and for the crowd to know, I met Anne about 3 weeks ago, and I fell in love with her expertise because I knew you guys would benefit from that. And today is all about birthing from beginning to end. So very happy to have you here to teach us all about that and the impact on us emotionally, Anne.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it's one of my passions.
So as a woman, the birthing process actually starts with us when we are being birthed by our own mother, and the impact on today's emotional stance can start as early as that. Am I correct?
Yeah, it can even start earlier, like in the pregnancy.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, when a woman is pregnant, and let's say, just for example, there's a lot of stress going on, those are stress hormones, and that gets to the baby. The emotions that the mother feels are the emotions that the baby feels. So it can be as early as, like my studies with the clarity breathwork and the trauma healing, it takes us back to a conception and how we are as a fetus in our mother's womb. Let's say, was the mother on medication? That's going to affect the baby. right? So was the mother drinking? How was she eating? What was her diet? That's going to affect the baby. So yeah, we're much more sophisticated now in our understanding of that. There's tons of research. You can go on birthpsychology.org, the American Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. There's tons of research now about the effects on the baby and the birth.
So as a woman today, it's important, if we haven't yet asked our own mother or father, for that is, if your mother is no longer alive, how was the whole pregnancy process of our mom and also birthing?
Right. And if we go back a few generations, in most cultures around the world, birth is a celebration and babies are born at home. And in the early 1900s, in most parts of the modern world, birth was moved to the hospital and it became a medical event. And it was almost like the humanity was stripped of it. So there was a lot of interventions that were introduced into the process that disempower women. And so in the last few generations, there's been a lot of research into this, and we are really feeling the effects of it now about how we came into the world, because a lot of times we were induced and our mothers were given medications and high use of forceps, and cesarean section is very high percentage, and babies' cords were cut right away. So babies were separated. They were taken to a nursery. They weren't given right to mother, and the formula companies were really pushing and marketing formula. So there's so many things that have happened in our early lives, in our cellular memory is still with us today and impacts us.
That's very interesting, because we had an expert in podcast 84 with Irene Lyon. You're probably aware of somatic work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Somatic intelligence, somatic experience, or organic intelligence. All the trauma healing now is most emotional pain and trauma needs to be released somatically, not through cognitive thinking about it or talking.
Exactly. And she never talked about the pregnancy or the birthing process, but she did say that trauma that happened to us mostly prior to the age of 9 was actually the trauma we're still carrying it on at 40, 45, and 50.
Right.
And that was impacting our health and adrenal fatigue in that case, or even eating behavior. So it's very interesting today that you talk about the pregnancy process and the birthing process and how it can have an impact on our current behavior and emotional status. And that's actually demonstrated through science, as you said.
Right.
Well, that's very interesting. So from there, you need to go back and look at how our mother was pregnant and our birthing, our own delivery, and then how we actually lived our own pregnancy. If we had the chance to have a child, how we lived our own pregnancy can also affect not only the baby, but ourselves. Am I correct?
Oh my gosh, huge. There is so much birth trauma from all the excess use of risky interventions in routine, normal pregnancy and birth. So women have lost confidence in their body and their ability to grow and birth and breastfeed a baby, and their strength, their capacity to do it. And that plays its role. Like when a woman, let's say, enters a hospital and she puts on a hospital gown, and we kind of give over the responsibility of the whole thing to the medical world. And it's so disempowering, and we're just expecting they're going to take care of it. But what happens is when you take a woman and you put her in a hospital gown and she's told she can't eat or drink and she has to lie down in the hospital bed and have monitoring, it turns it into a medical event, and she's not going to labor. Women birth like they breathe. And we need to create a space so that women and babies can come into the world in a gentle, celebratory, beautiful way. But when there's a lot of stress and the monitoring, and if a woman is lying down, and she's not going to labor well, and everyone's poking and prodding and coming in and examining, so then they need to give Pitocin to make it happen more intensely, more fast, and then the pain's too much, then they need an epidural, and it's just like one thing after the next, and then babies are coming into the world with the results of that. And so are moms. I hear from moms all the time, like they didn't want a cesarean, and just that they're so traumatized by negative experience they've had in their previous birth. They're so scared. Either it could be they were scared from what they hear from their friends in certain hospitals. And I don't know if you have this in Canada as much.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Yeah, they don't want to have major, or they hear about these scary stories, and the media doesn't help with the media hype. So a lot of these situations, these negative kind of fear-based, fear-inducing kind of birth, well, it's like the cascade of the interventions. One intervention causes another problem, which causes another problem, and stress and rescue. And it just not only results in poor outcomes, but you see the medical world just wants a breathing mother and baby, physically healthy. But they don't take into account what that kind of birth effect has on the mother and the baby. And when I support women in giving birth and help them reclaim their confidence and their strength and their feminine capacity to birth, they love their experience. And they don't feel trauma at all, even though it's extremely challenging. They did it. And they're so proud. And when they're supported in this way, they love their experience, even though it was challenging. I've had women tell me they're in ecstasy with their pain.
Oh.
And even change the word. They don't even use the word pain. They could use surges or waves or so many different ways we can work the mindset to restore a woman's ability to believe in her ability to birth.
It's very interesting because what we believe today to be the right way of giving birth in a very clean environment and in a hospital environment surrounded by specialists actually could cause us more emotional trauma than if we were to give birth naturally in our own home,
right?
From what I can tell.
Well, it could be you can have a natural empowered birth in any setting, but it takes planning. You can't go to a hospital that has a 50% or a 30% cesarean section rate and 99% epidural rate and 50% or 70% induction. You can't go to a high risk hospital and expect you're going to have a beautiful natural birth. You have to work extra hard to make sure no one is interfering. But why have to fight the system? There are plenty of hospitals and providers that can enable you.
Yeah.
That's what my course does. I have a whole course on how I bring the mothers through my practice from pregnancy through postpartum so that they can plan to not only change their mindset, but what setting and provider is going to be more in sync with the kind of birth they want to have and how can they plan for a beautiful natural birth that they love. And you can plan for it.
So the course you're talking about is supportive course. So for everyone, you can go to the show note at stephaniedodier.com/094 and the link of the course in there. But the course is a supporting online course to teach women what they need to have this more natural and holistic birth that will be less traumatic for them.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So I go through a holistic, healthy pregnancy for the mind, body, heart, and soul, how you can really maximize and have a vibrant, thriving pregnancy and baby making and growing your baby. But it also goes very deeply into preparing the mindset. How can we reframe this? For example, when a person is running the 26-mile marathon or climbing a mountain or performing on the dance stage, doing their performance, maybe they're working so hard and they are challenged to the max, but they're not thinking, oh my gosh, this is so painful. I'm not going to be able to do it. All successful athletes and performers, they're like, I know I'm going to do this. I'm going to rock this. And this is an adventure of a lifetime. How can we make this fun? How can we incorporate pleasure and all the senses into this experience? And that I go through in the pregnancy, and I go through all the testings and procedures that are done in the pregnancy and in the labor and delivery for mothers and babies so that they can really make an informed decision of thinking what they want to do. And then they can make a birth plan that they can discuss and vision with their partner and they can discuss with their providers. And then I go all through how to cope and how partners can help and preparing for the postpartum and taking care of the baby. Yeah.
So I want to make an analogy for my listener who may encounter this whole holistic birthing or pregnancy as something they've never heard before. Think about it as your American or Canadian food guide where you have been presented how to eat and you now know from the journey you've been on that that is not the right way to eat and that causes you to be sick or to be overweight or to have inflammation. Think of pregnancy in the same way. What you are currently, the model of pregnancy and birthing you are being presented with is actually what could cause trauma,
right? Where
the holistic is more real food, keto or paleo approach to food. Is that a good analogy?
Oh, excellent. Love it. Yeah. It's just kind of restoring, kind of returning to ourselves. We don't need lessons on how our heart should beat or how we breathe. But as you know, stress can change our heart rate, can change the way we breathe. So it's just kind of our body knows how to breathe if it's relaxed.
And your body knows how to give birth as a woman.
Right. Exactly. I have so much work to do with women in terms of restoring the confidence and lessening the fear. Because so many women are scared to give birth. I have thousands of women that I help that just rock it. And if I could do it and they could do it, any woman could do it. It's just how we give birth for thousands of years. Yeah.
And you have your own story with birth trauma and healing, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Can you share with the crowd listening?
Oh, sure. So I was 23 when I had my first unplanned pregnancy, and and I was an obstetric nurse at the time. And honestly, I was scared because I was working in a hospital that had a very high use of intervention, and I was seeing so many cesareans, and I was having to rescue so many of the problems that I saw, lots of crises. And birth to me was like an emergency room medical crisis, like a disaster waiting to happen. That's what I was seeing. So when I was pregnant, my biggest fear was having a cesarean, because I was also a dancer and very athletic. And I just saw a major abdominal surgery, and that wasn't always a great outcome. And it was scary to me. But I was given the royal treatment when I was in labor because I was giving birth on the unit where I worked. But being a nurse, I remember just the doctor kept coming in and just sticking his hands at me. And he kept saying, she's still 4. She's still 4. And he told the nurse outside the room, hang pit. Well, I knew what that was, but she comes in and she starts putting the medication in my IV bag because they wouldn't let me eat and drink. I had the IV. And I said, I don't want Pitocin, because I knew that was going to make everything harder and stronger. And then my Lamaze, my natural childbirth techniques were going to go out the window. And she said, honey, you don't want a cesarean, do you? And like, no. So then they did the Pitocin, and that made her heart rate drop dangerously. And they called an emergency cesarean. So here I was having exactly my fear. I was being rushed into the operating room for an emergency cesarean. And they prepped me and left me there. And I was left there for an hour.
Oh.
Like nobody was with me, no one was monitoring me. And maybe from the anesthesia, I started dilating and I started pushing, but I was petrified. So when I was pushing, I said, someone please come here and help me. The baby's coming. And the doctor comes running in and he cuts this big episiotomy, which is between the vaginal opening and the anal opening, and vacuums her out. They used to use forceps. Some hospitals now are just taking a big suction cup on her head. But I didn't want to see her. Like I thought she was dead. It was an hour. Her heart rate was so low and they called this an emergency, and then an hour later. So I thought she was dead. She was totally fine, but I was not. I said, never again, never again. Of course, 2 years later, I was pregnant again, unplanned. I was 25 now, and very similar situation. So both of those experiences, plus my working as a nurse in that unit, I was talking to people about it, and they were saying, you should be a midwife. And I'm like, what's that?
Yeah, exactly. What is a midwife? Because many people don't even know what it is.
Well, a midwife in the United States, it's master's degree training. So I have 7 years of training. In New York, you have to be a nurse first. And so I have a bachelor's in nursing and then a midwife. So postgraduate master's training, and expertise is in normal. And most women are normal. Most healthy women having babies, it's normal. And we know how to intervene if necessary. We can do anything. We can prescribe medications. We can prescribe all the lab tests, and we can do anything except basically surgery. And so we can do interventions and emergency skills and all that, but it's always about how can we keep this normal? How can we keep this safe? And most of the time, the more I practice, the less we do, the more it works. And the more nurturing and encouraging and supportive and reassuring that we are, that we create that environment where a woman feels safe, protected, undisturbed, like kind of how a woman feels when she has sex. She's making love. She needs to be private and safe and sensual and kind of allow her body to do it. And that's basically birth. So when I went to midwifery school, it was like I came home and I saw birth as beautiful. Like I was surrounded by, wow, this is a beautiful family experience where the children might be in the other room, the sister and sister-in-laws and whoever is supportive to the woman. There's no crisis. It's a very gentle, slow, or it could be even faster, but it's not a crisis. It's just a healthy process. A woman is like her most vulnerable, but she's also her most strong at birth. And she just needs a lot of loving care and support. Birth is normal till proven otherwise. And the vast majority, it's normal. So the field of obstetrics is a relatively in history new field. And it really, the focus is surgery and complication and disease. And we need that for a small percentage. But that high use of intervention and looking for problems, looking for disease and medical treatment and surgical treatment does not serve the vast majority of women having babies. So I remember when I finished midwifery school, oh my gosh, I was just loving this. And women were not being tied down. They were eating and drinking. And it was just a beautiful peak life experience for a woman and a baby. And then after the birth, we don't cut the cord. We just allow the process to unfold and the baby goes to the mom. It's not taken away to an isolette. or the nursery, the baby's with mom, and it's just like a beautiful experience. And that baby is going to grow up with a much different structure, mind, body, spirit, than that baby's mother, who might have had a very different experience. So when I had my third child, I was in with a midwife. I told the midwife, I said, for this to work, I need to feel it myself. And honestly, I'm really scared because of my last two experiences. And she said, oh my, you'll see, this will be very healing. And she was so right. What a night and day experience. I had two other babies in this midwifery sort of model of care. It was just my own body doing it and being supported. And it was so healing, so healing.
But I can only imagine right now how many women are listening to this and saying, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah, that's a lot of us. I mean, most of us came into the world like that, unless we were born in Guatemala or let's say in Sweden. There are modern countries that have much higher use of midwives. Like everybody in Scandinavia goes to midwives unless they're high risk. And then they go to an obstetrician who specializes in high risk.
Yeah, the one thing that you're recognizing yourself into this story, the number one thing I want you to know, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's not your fault.
No. Oh my gosh, no. But there's things you can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not your fault because that's what we are taught through our medical system and through our doctor's intervention.
Right.
We think this is the right model, and now we realize it's not. What do we do next?
Well, it's not only not our fault, but we can be empowered with, okay, what can we do? How can we create our life?
Yes.
It's not our fault how we were raised, for example, or let's say if we experienced abuse in childhood or bullying in high school or any sort of trauma or emotional pain as a child. It's not our fault, right? But okay, we don't have to walk around being damaged. We can make choices in how we can, we have tremendous capacity to heal. You know, that's why I love the trauma healing that I'm involved with.
So let's talk about that. So you obviously had trauma birth, and a lot of women listening are realizing that they may still be holding on to this emotional traumatic event. How do we go about moving forward and healing from that?
Right. So I came to that, and it could even be earlier. Like I had experienced abuse as a child. And so I came into my adult life very wounded. So I was carrying that in addition. And it started to catch up with me. I was being triggered by things. I mastered repression, and most women, most children, most high school students, anybody, we just repress, we bury, and we deny. That saved our life maybe when it was necessary, but it didn't serve us as adults. We can sometimes find out, like, why are we getting triggered? Or certain things make us more upset or stressed out than others. And little by little, I was really noticing that I was feeling different things in my body subconsciously and pains that I didn't exactly know how to process. No holistic modality touched it. No talk therapy touched it. And I started more and more helping women, and more with my research is that any sort of repressed emotional pain and trauma is not necessarily anything you have to analyze through psychoanalysis. It has to be released through the body somatically. And that is the cutting edge trauma research, and healing from emotional pain and trauma is through the somatic experience, somatic release. And I always knew that dancing and being active made me feel better, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. And maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was at a yoga retreat with a dear friend of mine, and somebody there was raving about this rebirthing experience that they had just gone through. They went to someone who they're called a rebirther. Clarity breathwork is actually the modality, but it's rebirthing is just the origin, and there's been different branches. But she went through a session where a woman talked to her and then led her through like sort of a meditation process, and then about an hour of conscious continued connective breathing in and out for about an hour. And she said she felt huge energy pile up in her body, just leave her body. She just shaked it out. I'm like, no way. She said, yeah, change my life. And I'm very open to this because I'm very into mind-body medicine and very into holistic modalities. So I said, I'm making an appointment. And I went in totally not knowing what to expect because I had never heard of this. And this was in Costa Rica, so I wasn't Googling it. And this woman, she spent a few hours talking with me, and then she had me breathe in this certain technique. And I felt it was almost like thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of brick of trauma energy trapped in my body start to accumulate. And I felt this energy and electric pulsing all over my body and tingling. And then it like shook it out. I started shaking, but it felt awesome. I'm like, what did you give me? I thought she gave me a drug. That's was like, but no, she said, this is breath work. I'm like, what is this? I have to do this again. I felt like I had just dumped millions of pounds of bag. Literally, that's what it felt like. And I knew I needed more. So that was my journey. I continued to work with her. She referred me to somebody else in my area. And then I went to the actual levels 1 through 4 training and workshop, which was the most profound healing ever. And I was in Costa Rica. I was in a retreat in a workshop. Let's say there must be 40 to 50 people in it, and all with regular human beings. We all have baggage, and we start to ask our mothers about our birth and our pregnancies. What was it like when we were in the womb? We worked on the mother, trauma about our father, trauma about any kind of emotional pain related to different stages in our life. And literally, that was the most transformative experience of my life. I thought like nothing was ever going to help me get rid of how this abuse and trauma was in my body, impacting my adult life. And I thought nothing was going to help because I had tried so many things, and I was really feeling like sort of like an inner torture. Mm-hmm. But this was the most profound relief. It was so life-changing, and I witnessed it. And now I'm certified as a practitioner, and I facilitated trainings, and I'm in a room where I see 40, 50 people, and they're just shaking it off, and like emotions come and up, and we allow and we embrace, and then it's released, and it's done kind of in a subconscious state. The breathing increases oxygen and the life force to the body, and exhaling is release of toxins, and it's just kind of like a release of emotional toxins. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing to experience that. Like, this is just such a powerful but simple but very profound modality.
So for the people listening and saying, oh, this could help me, is it something that you offer online, or something that they need to search a practitioner locally to do this modality?
Yeah. So Clarity Breathwork is the name of the modality. Locally, I do private and group sessions, small group sessions. It can be done via Skype, but if somebody feels that they would benefit more by gentle touch is used, and like some people heal better in that environment with a one-on-one actual in-person, they would have to look up rebirthing and Clarity Breathwork to see if they can find a practitioner in their area. But it can be done via Skype. And it's something that's easy to learn, and it's huge in Europe, in Israel, and Australia. It's very big around the world. It's kind of just surfacing more and more in the United States. And I'm not sure about Canada.
The crowd is international that's listening to the podcast, from Australia to Canada to the US.
Any Europeans?
In Europe. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know how they have yoga centers? They have breathing centers. You could go to a center all over Europe. You can find breathing centers where they have group breathwork sessions. And I just like Clarity because it's just a bit more of a yogic form of it. And I love more of a feminine, nurturing, safe, tolerant space, like more processing. Sometimes you can find rebirthing where you just breathe and there's no kind of integration before and after. So I tend to like Clarity form of it, Clarity Breathwork. But you could find rebirthing centers like you can find yoga centers in Europe.
It's interesting because, and I want to link this back to the main reason why people are here, which is emotional eating and binging and relationship to food. And we teach a formula that's called the Crave Cure formula, which is basically your initiation to breath work. So if you have done the Crave Cure program or you have my Crave Cure guide, what Anna is talking about right now is your Crave Cure formula, your beginning process of integrating breath and feeling the emotion behind your craving.
Right. Yes. It's all about embracing, instead of repressing, to love and embrace all our feelings, because our feelings are like, our body doesn't lie. It's, our mind can play tricks with us, our thoughts and the thoughts that we think. It's creative. We can manifest success with our thoughts, or we can limit ourselves with our thoughts. We can be afraid or we can be excited. We can choose the thoughts we want to entertain. Like, thoughts will come involuntarily, but which ones do we want to carry and bring into our whole storyline?
So what I was saying to people is the Crave Cure formula is the entry level of that breath work, where instead of eating the food you're craving, you're actually connecting with your breath, which allows you to connect with the emotion behind that binge or that overeating behavior. And what Anna's talking about is the next step of actually going in through breath and cleansing those suppressed emotions you've had for years.
Yes. And feeling them and trusting them and naming them and allowing them to leave because they're not serving us right now. Like old trauma. old baggage.
And that's why I say to all the people out there, your craving are not your enemies. They're actually your guides. That craving you feel guides you towards finding what is out of balance, or finding what's upsetting you. So the more you suppress them, the further trauma you're creating inside of you.
Yeah. And animals, unanimously, animals, like when they're exposed in the wild to a trauma, for example, a deer would encounter a tiger. The deer gets the sympathetic nervous, the fight or flight response happens, and the deer runs for its life because it's going to be eaten. And let's say the deer gets away. All animals, after a trauma exposure, they shake it off. We don't. So this allows our body to certain connective breathing technique, continuous and deep, that allows our body to get into a little bit of a semi-subconscious state, and our body shakes it off on its own. Our body releases it on its own. And emotions will come up, and people cry, and people go through different emotional releasing, but they all say how much better they feel. They all say how transformative it is.
And I'm going to share a short little personal experience and into pain. So I have a scoliosis in my lumbar area, which causes me sometimes to have back spasm. And I struggled for that for 10, 15 years until I discovered breath work. And believe it or not, and I know Ann, you will believe, but the listener, when I go into back spasm, which happened just last night, when I actually connect with my breath and do deep breathing exercise, the back spasm literally go away.
It's amazing. Yeah.
This is how powerful it is. And drugs don't cut it.
No.
Breath will do.
Drugs a Band-Aid, Yes. Yeah, it's just more suppression.
So I want to segue a little bit into postpartum. Postpartum depression, or call it postpartum illness. What is that, and where does it come from?
Well, so they call the first year after having a baby, when a woman is feeling anxiety symptoms or symptoms of depression. So that could be, excess worrying, excess sleeping, not enough sleeping, sadness, crying for no reason, and it interferes with her life, just regular activities of living. That's called postpartum depression. And there's different symptoms that women will have. It's a huge adjustment of having a baby, especially the first baby, but even having the second baby, the third baby, it's a huge adjustment. It's the physical adjustment. It's an emotional adjustment. It's a family adjustment. And women throughout history were supported in community. In the modern world, women are often more alone. So it used to be that the sisters and the mother and grandmother and friends and everybody was around this woman, so that she was totally off and could only focus on resting and healing and breastfeeding, and everything else was taken care of by her family and friends. Today, a lot of women are alone, so that they lack support, and they're sent home from the hospital 2 days after they give birth, 5 days after cesarean birth, and they have to resume cooking and cleaning and childcare and errands, and also heal from this major, huge transition of giving birth, or they could have had surgery, and there's no help. So if they're not being helped and supported, that's just like a recipe sometimes, to be overwhelmed and overstressed, and the symptoms of depression or anxiety can take over. So I help women in the pregnancy to make sure they have that tribe around them. And what can we do to help them prepare and be very well supported in that forgotten, what they call fourth trimester, which is certainly the first 6 weeks to 12 weeks after having a baby, but it can carry through that whole year. But it takes a village to raise a baby and a new mom.
So what I hear, there's a lot of prevention that can be done to avoid postpartum depression. But if a woman is currently going through that or has gone through that, what can we do holistically in a non-medical approach to help her through that journey?
Oh, well, sometimes it can be as simple. It depends how serious. I tell every woman, there's a whole list of different signs, for example. So the first 2 weeks after having a baby, it's common to have a lot of the symptoms. You can have mood swings, you can cry, and then you don't know why you're crying, and you're so happy, but you're just crying. You can have a lot of these symptoms, but the first few weeks, I just tell everyone, make sure you sleep when you can, sleep when the baby sleeps, and make sure you are off from everything else, all your job responsibilities and household responsibilities, like I said, and make sure you have a good hug, a good laugh, and a good cry, like every day. That's just prevention. But if it starts to escalate into a heightened panic attacks and insomnia and feeling very agitated, or it could be both, like anxious symptoms and depression. So like not wanting to get out of bed, crying all the time, just feeling guilty and kind of isolated, can't make decisions, can't think straight. Sometimes without treatment, it can progress, but rare. But it does happen in the modern world, about 10% of women who give birth. So I take it very seriously. Some serious outcomes, from suicides, for example, or, have occurred. So the medical community has taken it much more seriously, and more people are coming out about it. It's not something to be ashamed of. This is what's going on and we need to get help. Sometimes the woman's partner calls me. Sometimes it can be as simple, like I go over with them, like who's helping them. Sometimes it's just, maybe we need more help in the home. Maybe we need so much help that you can actually have an hour each day or 2 hours each day to go out and just be by yourself and go to yoga or take a walk or just go have a cup of tea with a friend, right? Sometimes it could be very simple lifestyle changes so that a woman could just make simple adjustments, and that could be huge. It could be, maybe can we add 10 minutes twice a day of just quietly sitting and breathing? Can we incorporate dance into your life? Like I use a lot of dance, like dancing out emotions, playing a very sad song and like really getting into it and sobbing and moving, and then turning on like a song that's like upbeat, like, so you would kind of release it, you move through it and then lift yourself up, so there's so many different things that we can do to create joy and do what we love. And then there's herbs and there's supplements. I like to make sure, her diet. Sometimes, for example, it could be just related to a woman that is not eating healthy food. She's just grabbing cake and, very high glycemic carbs, for example, that don't really fill her nourishment, and they just raise a spike and a rapid drop in the blood sugar. And that can affect her moods. It could be that she can't fall asleep, insomnia. So sometimes just listening to what's going on, and it could just be making simple adjustments, like several times a day. Make sure you're getting, healthy fat and healthy protein. And so it could just be that. Then there's homeopathic remedies that I use depending on a woman's symptom. There's herbs, St. John's wort.
Is amazing.
Yeah. So many holistic modalities that we can use depending on the woman and what is going on. And then this breath work is a big on my remedy suggestion. But, there is a place for medication. I know Dr. Kelly Brogan, she's a psychiatrist, very holistic, integrative psychologist. Her entire practice is, women with anxiety and all sorts of eating disorders and depression, and nobody's on medication. She has an entire protocol that helps people with using a variety of modalities without any medication. But there are rare times, like if a woman is having frightening thoughts of hurting herself, or hurting her baby, or, just scary thoughts, or she's having, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there. I mean, there are times when medication is life-saving and can be used. We use some of the other modalities to help her restore herself back to herself and feeling good.
And is it possible that this postpartum, and I use the air quote right now, could be actually due to the trauma of the birth process not being...
huge. Absolutely. Especially if her choices were not honored and she was planning to give birth in a natural way, and she was totally disempowered, and there were all sorts of medical interventions, and it ended up that she had a cesarean. I mean, she could have guilt, she could have failure, sense of failure. It is such a peak life experience. It's such a crucial time in a woman's life. So if she wasn't treated with respect and dignity, and there wasn't this incredible joy and empowerment, it's like a birthright of a woman, the rite of passage. And if it wasn't done in the sort of kind of the natural way, I mean, yes, there's a place for interventions, but let's say everything is well, there's much more risk of trauma, which can absolutely cause depression and anxiety. Sure.
So I want people to hear the message. In our world, we use the term body messages.
Oh, yeah.
That we talk about craving, binging, any type of physical symptoms such as postpartum depression is only a message from our body post-birthing that something is not being addressed, either physically, emotionally, trauma way. But the depression is not that there's anything wrong with us. It's actually a message to guide us to look into another part of us to heal.
Yeah, that we need to heal. There's no blame and shame and judgment in this. These are all messages that something is not right. I need to address something. I need to change something. I need more sleep. I need to eat a certain way. I need more help. We're not super women. I mean, it really takes a village.
It's very interesting conversation for anywhere you are in your journey as a woman, that you are pre-birthing or you are in the process of pregnancy or post-pregnancy. I think there's a lot to learn as a woman with our relationship to pregnancy and birthing and creating a child that may hold some of the question we've been asking as to why we act a certain way today, or helping us through making this journey more holistically. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you today, because unfortunately, there's a lot of women that are not exposed to this quote unquote other way of looking at birthing or pregnancy.
And when you say other way, I mean, it's really, if you look at history, this is kind of returning how we used to do it for thousands of years, or we wouldn't have survived as a species. So it worked.
And it's the exact same point of view on eating. That what we teach in our world here is going back to the ancestral way of eating.
Yes, right. Oh, amazing. Amazing.
So it's the same thing, but I wanted to bring this angle on the birthing and pregnancy process because we need to do the same way. We need to go back to our ancestral way of pregnancy and birthing and relating to our children to find that balance and that health. And if we have not done that, then there is things such as clarity breath work, or even if you're a mother who has a young daughter, getting her to take that course on your birthing course.
Yeah, love your birth. HomeSweetHomeBirth.com, love your birth. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So they can get educated on this ancestral way, quote unquote, other ways of looking at pregnancy and birthing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And giving them the tool to look at that. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, it's my honor. And, you know, I have a free download. I'd love to offer it to your listeners. So I created an ebook, like a Rolodex of like 154 of my favorite resources for women, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, inspiration, parenting, breastfeeding, you know, all the resources, movies and books and yoga supplies and birth supplies. And I made it into an ebook, and it's about 154 there. So like even women could give their daughters or daughter-in-laws or friends of anyone that you know having a baby. It's HomeSweetHomeBirth.com/gift.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show note as well at stephaniedodier.com/094. So you can just click the link if you're on iTunes right now. Go to the show note and click the link, and that'll take you directly to that link to get those resources. That's amazing. It's like a guidebook entry level to more holistic approach to being a woman.
To being a woman, all stages of life. Midwives, yeah, we help women through all the stages of life. Yeah.
Awesome. So I highly recommend that you go check out Anne's work at Home Sweet Home Birth, and I will put all the links in the show note. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was wonderful. It's really an honor.
There you have it. I hope it rocked your world just like it did mine. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm so glad you stuck around till the end. Now, if you did learn something or enjoy the show and know women in your life, in your community that can actually benefit from this information, from knowing this because there's an upcoming pregnancy in her life, maybe it's your daughter, your niece, or a woman that you know have had a lot of emotion and trauma around their birth, I highly encourage you to share this podcast right from your device through the show note at stephaniedodier.com/094. Just share via email. Invite that woman in your life to share this piece of information. Maybe this will change her life just like it did for maybe you out there. Now share also on Facebook. You can tag me or you can tag Anne at Homes Sweet Home Birth. That's her hashtag on Instagram. You can tag both of us. Ask us questions and let us know how this show impacted your life. Now we have a great episode coming up next Sunday, show 95, with the famous green smoothie girl, Robin Openshaw. And we're going to talk about an aspect of food that we have yet to touch, which is the energetic frequency of food and how it impacts our craving. Pretty cool, innovative information that Robin's going to share with us. Thank you again for being here with me and Anne. And I wish you a great day. I love you. We'll see you on the next episode.